Welcome back to another episode of On the Line. I am your accountant, Samira Moyedin. Honest Reporting Canada, the most Orwellian named organization in this country. I'm not a fan. Now, this is an organization that is a mendacious mouthpiece, bills itself as a media organization that does the Israeli government's bidding in our country. As you'll recall, I've also mentioned how this organization gives $1,000 to students on university campuses to act like Stasi, spying on professors, students, their own student newspapers. Today, I'm speaking with Sean Tucker, a professor at the University of Regina in Occupational Therapy. He has filed an official complaint with the Canada Revenue Agency against Honest Reporting Canada, saying that it violates the charitable status laws of Canada, arguing that there is nothing actually charitable about what Honest Reporting does, including targeting professors, students, and, most importantly, journalists across this country, doxing, harassing, and making very libelous statements against them. You know, when I left Legacy Media in November of 2023, I thought that this organization would stop harassing me, would stop hounding me. In fact, it hasn't. It's launched some of its most asinine and inane action alerts, as it calls it, against me since I've left. You can see some of them here. This last one that they did in April, sending their maniacal subscribers over to the Globe and Mail. I don't even know where they got this photo from, but you know what it reminded me of? Was this guy. So thank you, Honest Reporting, for using that photo. And thank you for using this one. This was one of my favorites. If you're going to do another one, make sure you get my good side, which is this one. Honestly, I make light of this, but it's not fun to be harassed or targeted by this organization, and I'm hoping that the Canada Revenue Agency will finally do its job and revoke the charitable status of this nefarious, disgusting group. As always, we ask that you support the work we do. We cannot do this work without you. Please head on over to patreon.com/onthelinemedia. Show us some love. We want to continue to bring you the voices you most need to hear from now. Coming up is my conversation with Professor Sean Tucker. Stay tuned. You don't want to miss this one. Sean Tucker, thank you so much for joining me on the line. University of Regina Professor of Occupational Therapy. You recently wrote a formal letter of complaint to Canada Revenue Agency about Honest Reporting Canada. Now, this is an organization that I speak a lot about on this program, the mendacious mouthpiece monitoring group for the Israeli government. I have been a favorite of theirs since 2018. And before we get to the complaint, your findings about this organization, I want to know why you wanted to do this. Why write this formal letter of complaint to the Canada Revenue Agency?
First, Samira, thanks for having me on the show. It's a real honor to be here. So my area is occupational health and safety, and harassment and online harassment has increased in recent years, and it's affecting a whole range of workers, public-facing workers at grocery stores, to healthcare workers and journalists. You know, the impact on journalists is clear from polls that have been done of journalists that have been exposed to online harassment. And back in 2022, a colleague and I, Heather McPherson, who used to be an editor at a couple papers in Saskatchewan, her and I wrote a national opinion piece for CBC.ca on the harassment of journalists, death threats, racism directed towards racialized journalists. And this kind of came in the wake of the trucker convoy and occupation of Ottawa. And so it's been on my radar. And Twitter and kind of saw some of the posts that Honest Reporting was making, and it just like immediately kind of made that connection. Like this is not normal. This is
Certainly
not
not
normal.
charitable.
It's not
Certainly not
charitable.
charitable. Yeah.
No, it's not good faith critique of media. This really crosses the line, and I don't have an accounting background, so I have colleagues who work in accounting, so I'm not familiar with the application of CRA policies related to like political activity, et cetera. But my focus in my letter was really on the health and safety of journalists and how honest reporting is, really inciting harassment of journalists through their campaigns.
Um, I want to get to the letter you wrote, just 5 pages, but it also had a lot of research in there. And I want to read an excerpt here. You write, "It is my professional opinion that Honest Reporting Canada's activities go well beyond good faith critique of news stories. Instead, they foment politically motivated harassment and doxing campaigns against journalists and other media voices, example, academics, commentators, Palestinian interviewees, whom Honest Reporting Canada and their supporters seek to silence through intimidation. This is a clear violation of the CRA's policies regarding permissible charitable activities, specifically related to preventing harm. Like all workers, journalists in Canada are protected from harassment under occupational health and safety law." It's an interesting way that you put it, because a lot of journalists, a lot of my colleagues, just sort of think that this is part of the job, that harassment is part of what we have to go through. But that's not really part of our job description, is it?
No, it's not. I'm in Vancouver. I'm attending the Unifor National Convention as an observer, and the president of Unifor yesterday gave an address, and a part of that address was referring to online harassment of journalists, because
Mm.
Unifor represents journalists.
Unifor
And
Unifor is my union, yeah, part of the Canada Freelance Union.
yes, and the problem is it's become normalized. This is not about um, you know criticizing journalists or disagreeing or expressing disagreement. It's the how it's done, and that's what I take issue with. And in terms of the CRA rules, they have what they call a public benefit test
Mm.
to charitable activities, and they're clear. They say that a charity's activities cannot cause harm, and if it does, it must be minimal, and they must take steps to mitigate and minimize that harm. And I don't see honest reporting doing anything of the sort, because I think that their motivation is to have these campaigns to rattle journalists and others, and ultimately try to silence them. And I just posted this on Twitter yesterday. I went through their what they call action alerts. We'll probably get into that. And they're raising concerns about reporting and interviewees and that, and they've had 73, so they're really ramping these up now.
Mhm.
And only 3 have led to corrections. And I don't think their game is about media corrections. I think it's something else.
As you say, it's ultimately to silence. One of those alerts that they put out, they call them action alerts, as you said, is about a story I saw yesterday that CBC Kids put up, where freelancers in Gaza went and interviewed children about what the past 22, 23 months has been like for them, right? 2 years of no school. And it was I watched this, and I'm not sure what the complaints really could be against this, but that, and we were talking about this before we went to air, shows the level of desperation right now of Honest Reporting Canada. Let's get to some of your findings and the research and what you found. And before I do that, full disclosure, I was one of the journalists that you spoke with about being harassed by Honest Reporting Canada. So can you take me through some of the findings and what those processes were that you found?
So what I did is I looked at there's now 3 or 4 stories, the Maple, other outlets on honest reporting and the impact on journalists. So I looked at those, and there's interviews with journalists there. Some chose to remain anonymous. Others gave their names. So they describe what this is like, what experience. You know, even student journalists from student papers are targeted by honest reporting. So kind of that spectrum there. And I think we also need to acknowledge that journalists don't like to talk about this side of their work and what they experience.
Yeah.
And that is something I have in speaking with journalists and producers. It's a real thing. And so I think this is an underreported phenomenon, first of all. So I went through these stories, and then some social media posts, but this was not a kind of systematic kind of look at all the data across, the last few years. And, like the types of behaviors just fit the definition of harassment, what a reasonable person would think would be humiliating or intimidating to somebody, and the language that honest reporting uses. I've just got some examples here, like,
Yeah, let's hear them.
a terrorism glorifier, right? They love radical anti-Israel agitator, just torqued, emotional, um,
Hyperbolic.
smearing, yeah, just right over the top. Fringe extremists, right? Um, I this language. So I looked at these things. I looked at some of their action alerts, and then the impact. So the impact on journalists, and you can speak best to this because you've experienced this and spoken to other journalists, and I think that's really key here. Is the psychological toll that this takes. So it's completely unacceptable from an occupational health and safety perspective, completely unacceptable. And I think that, ultimately the responsibility lies with the newsrooms, the employers, to prevent their employees from being exposed to this sort of bad faith types of attacks. So that's something else I've got some thoughts on. Yeah, I don't know if you want to add, because you've spoken to many journalists, you've seen this and you've experienced it
Yeah,
for
I mean,
many
I've
months.
experienced. I didn't even know who Honest Reporting was until I started at CBC, and I remember the very first time that they came after me was because of a panel that I had put together of young people in both Gaza, Tel Aviv. So this was Israelis and Palestinians speaking to one another, which is something that people don't like, apparently. We like to set up dogfights amongst people in the media, unfortunately. So when people are having nice conversations with one another, it creates some sort of ire for Honest Reporting Canada. But that's the first time they came after me. And I can tell you in newsrooms that Honest Reporting Canada really does live in the minds of managing editors and executive producers. And that's because of the 60,000 to 70,000 subscribers that they have. And they send out these mass emails. So they bombard you. And as Canada's public broadcaster, they are mandated to respond to every single letter, which is crazy. So a lot of the times when we would pitch stories coming out of Israel, Palestine, you would get an executive producer just saying to you, "Oh, I can't deal with the letters." So there was this chilling effect, this self-censorship that would happen just because you don't want to deal with the litany of complaints that would come in. And that's really their MO. That's really where they thrive. It's not necessarily that, they always get these success stories and you see that green check mark, that they always put on success. It's in the self-censorship and in the censoring of journalists that happens. You recently shared a graph with me actually about the month that just passed and what honest reporting. And I want to put that up here. So you showed that they had 73 alerts out, and that 3 of them were successful. Something that I watched today, which again blew my mind, and it had to do with Canada's public broadcaster. On the same day that Israel killed 5 journalists, this was yesterday, CBC aired an interview with a gentleman named Dan Perry, saying that Israel doesn't target journalists and that more often than not, journalists are actually Hamas fighters. This is Canada's national public broadcaster. The reason I bring this up is because Honest Reporting Canada praised the CBC for airing this interview. So it's not just that Honest Reporting goes after people. It's also that they also praise you, when you do the work of Israel and become the spokesperson of the spokesperson. Has there been any response from the Canada Revenue Agency to your letter?
Not yet. And I did send the letter to a couple of MPs as well, so they were aware of it. It's a funny thing about the CRA charity directorate. They actually don't have an email to send to it, so it's in Canada Post. So we'll wait and hear what they have to say. But it's really, I think, important to note that this is not the first formal complaint against Honest Reporting. And there's been petitions going back over a year ago. And so the CRA, I think it's important for viewers to understand, there's one question of like, the defamation question and that sort of thing. And I suspect that Honest Reporting plays right up to the line, as close to the line, and that's how they play it. The second question, and this is what my letter is about, is should they have a charity? Should they be a registered charity?
Yes.
And that's where I'm focused on. And as a registered charity, they can issue like tax receipts to donors, right? And so, where's the public benefit in this? Where's the public benefit in intimidation of journalists, columnists, and Palestinian voices? I don't see it. And, with these action alerts, what they do, if people aren't familiar with them, is, they find, you mentioned they've got their subscribers. So 70,000, they say they've got 70,000. They're kind of their eyes and ears. And so I think they report back to Honest Reporting. We saw this. And it can be in the community newspaper. Like it's not just CBC.
It's anywhere.
Like,
Yeah.
it's anywhere. Okay. And so often what they'll start with is like the mock 10, we're going right for the action alert. Like, they're not starting with a note to the news desk and that. They're just going for this like post with the picture of the journalist or the interviewee, highly torqued, emotional, get people riled up language, put it on social media. And then on their website, they've got a pre-written statement with a really inflammatory language and a subject line, and you can edit that and send it off and blast, right? Sort of thing. So is this a legitimate charity? Is that a legitimate activity? Is there a real net public benefit from that? And I think most reasonable people will look at that and go, no. Not only is there harm to journalists, but there's a harm to our democracy in terms of we are supporting this sort of activity. And I really urge CRA to address this. I mean, again, they've had months of complaints about this.
It's really a systemic issue. Also, just on the back end, and this may be a little bit too inside baseball for people, but as I said, it really has a chilling effect on the work we do on Israel-Palestine itself. And that for me is the biggest issue because, I'm not a damsel in distress type of gal, but most journalists and some journalists are not built like others. A lot of journalists who are just starting out in the industry do silence themselves because they don't want to be targeted by this organization. And honest reporting, I'm not sure how many people are know this. I mean, they don't just have these alerts that they do. They actually give money to students. They call them media fellows. They will offer $1,000 to students on university campuses across this country to basically act like Stasi, to report on their professors, what is being taught in classrooms, and then to go after their own school newspapers, their, their own reporters, as you said, student reporters. So no one is safe, and I'm wondering what you found out in terms of the psychological effects that some of these campaigns have on journalists.
I think it can be very significant. And again, I want to emphasize, the underreporting of this. And so, I worked with the information that was in the public domain. And again, I would really defer to you and the experiences that you've heard. I mean, I do think it's worth having a proper study of this, but anxiety, sleeplessness, going on leave, leaving the business altogether. I think young journalists, young women, racialized journalists. I mean, I think we know from other surveys of journalists that this takes an enormous toll. You've already mentioned, the not covering stories, but safety, their physical safety, worried about, and doxing campaigns, worried about their families as well. So it's very worrisome, and it's beyond the immediate impact on the journalists themselves, on our democracy and the health of our media, and that it's a major impact.
One of the last, the last complaints, I guess, I don't even know what you would call it. One of the last action alerts that Honest Reporting Canada had out on me was just this past April, and they sent the complaint to the Globe and Mail, where I often write opinion pieces, and they used a photo that I am not sure even where they got it from because it's nowhere available online, and it is a photo of me on the campus of the University of Toronto, which really freaked me out because I was thinking, are you following me around taking photos of me? It really makes you constantly look behind your back as you're walking around. And it does, there's a precariousness to it that never leaves you, you know?
I
Um,
think it's important for people to think about that. Like in your job, do you feel hunted? People listening, you're not a journalist. Do you feel hunted? Do you feel like you're getting these emails all the time? Just put yourself in the shoes of a journalist. Think about how that would make you feel. And it takes a toll. And for some people, depending on the seriousness, one incident could be, a reference to one of their children. I mean, I'm out. Like that's like I can't do this. Um, family members, other family members. It's or any details that they might know about you, like that can be incredibly unsettling. And then you mentioned the photos. I mean, there's a physician in Toronto area where they kind of sexualized a photo. They
oh,
had one
yes.
just last
This is
week where they,
Dr. Kavita Algu. I had shown this photo before to my
yeah,
audience
it's
of
just
how they
it's
altered.
outrageous. And just last week there was a columnist with Le Devoir who they put like streaming tears down her face and modified. So they've got a playbook. Um, the sad truth is, I think they've had some success with this.
Yes.
I what I hearing is that some are at newsrooms are just ignoring honest reporting now, and I
I
think
hope
the
that's
tide
right.
is
I hope
maybe
that's true.
changing.
I hope that's true because it's not just that they have success with this, they are funded by some of the biggest law firms in this country. Their funding per year is in the millions of dollars. That's no joke, right? And you mentioned the Maple. They have done a deep dive on where Honest Reporting gets its funding from, and I will make that article available to our viewers. And I'll also make your complaint letter available for people to read and the research that you've done. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Samara.